The heavy rain pounded against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse office on the 57th floor of Manhattan's most prestigious building, where Jonathan Maxwell stood, his trembling hands clutching a crystal glass of 25-year-old Scotch. The golden liquid inside rippled with each involuntary shake, much like the way his entire world was about to shatter. At 45, he had everything a man could dream of: a net worth of $2.3 billion, a thriving investment empire, and a reputation that opened every door in New York's elite social circles. But tonight, as the storm raged outside, he stared at the email that would destroy it all. "My dearest Jonathan," the message began, written by the woman he trusted with not only his heart, but also his most dangerous secrets. Isabella Martinez, his wife's best friend and his secret lover for the past 18 months, had just delivered an ultimatum that made his blood run cold. The affair that had started as a passionate escape from his loveless marriage had evolved into something far more sinister, and now Isabella held evidence of his darkest business dealings, threatening to expose everything unless he left his wife and transferred half of his assets to her name. The weight of betrayal pressed heavily on his chest as memories flooded his mind: the clandestine meetings in luxury hotels across Europe, the whispered promises in the dark, and the way Isabella had masterfully woven herself into every aspect of his life. She had been there during his biggest business deals, offering support and understanding when his wife, Catherine, was too busy with her charitable foundations to notice his struggles, or so he had thought. What Jonathan didn't know yet was that this was just the beginning of an elaborately orchestrated plan that had been set in motion long before he'd ever laid eyes on Isabella. As he stood there contemplating his next move, his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Check your private server. Password Manhattan 197. 8. The message sent chills down his spine. That password was known only to him and his most trusted advisor, Marcus Chen. Someone had penetrated his inner circle, and the implications were terrifying. With shaking fingers, he accessed the server, and what he found made him collapse into his leather chair. Hundreds of photos, documents, and video recordings revealed a truth so shocking that his mind refused to process it initially. Isabella wasn't working alone. She never had been. The conspiracy reached far deeper than he could have imagined, involving people he had trusted for decades, including members of his own board of directors. As thunder cracked outside, illuminating the New York skyline in brief, violent bursts, Jonathan realized he was standing at a crossroads. He could surrender to Isabella's demands and lose everything he'd built, or he could fight back against an enemy whose true face he was only beginning to understand. But fighting back would mean unleashing secrets that could destroy not only him, but everyone around him, including Catherine, the wife he had betrayed, but who might be the only person he could truly trust now. The rain continued its relentless assault on the windows as Jonathan poured himself another drink, his mind racing through possibilities and consequences. What he didn't realize was that at that very moment, in a luxurious apartment across town, Isabella was meeting with the true architect of his downfall, someone whose identity would shake the very foundation of everything he believed about love, loyalty, and revenge. The next morning dawned with an eerie calm that bellied the storm brewing in Jonathan's life as he sat in his weekly board meeting. Every face around the mahogany table now held a potential threat. His eyes lingered on Marcus Chen, his CFO of 15 years, wondering if those late-night strategy sessions had been opportunities for information gathering rather than friendship. The presentation about quarterly earnings felt distant and meaningless as his mind raced through years of interactions, searching for clues he might have missed. Suddenly, his personal phone vibrated with a message that made his heart stop. "Your wife knows everything. Meet me at the Pierre Hotel Suite, 1104 3 p.m. Comey. Alone, or the FBI gets an anonymous tip about the Singapore deal." Jonathan's hand tightened around the phone, his knuckles turning white. The Singapore deal, his company's darkest secret, involved manipulated stocks and offshore accounts that had secured his position in the Billionaires Club 5 years ago. As the meeting, him, including Catherine, the wife he had betrayed, but who might be the only person he could truly trust now. The rain continued its relentless assault on the windows as Jonathan poured himself another drink, his mind racing through possibilities and consequences. What he didn't realize was that at that very moment, in a luxurious apartment across town, Isabella was meeting with the true architect of his downfall, someone whose identity would shake the very foundation of everything he believed about love, loyalty, and revenge. The next morning dawned with an eerie calm that bellied the storm brewing in Jonathan's life as he sat in his weekly board, meeting every face. Around the mahogany table now held a potential threat. His eyes lingered on Marcus, Chen, his CFO of 15 years, wondering if those late-night strategy sessions had been opportunities for information gathering rather than friendship. The presentation about quarterly earnings felt distant and meaningless as his mind raced through years of interactions, searching for clues he might have missed. Suddenly, his personal phone vibrated with a message that made his heart stop. Your wife knows everything. Meet me at the Pierre Hotel suite. 16:43 p.m. Come alone or the FBI gets an anonymous tip about the Singapore deal. Jonathan's hand tightened around the phone, his knuckles turning white. The Singapore deal, his company's darkest secret, involved manipulated stocks and offshore accounts that had secured his position in the Billionaires Club 5 years ago. As the meeting dispersed, Catherine's name flashed across his screen. His wife's voice, usually composed and elegant, carried an unfamiliar edge. Jonathan, we need to talk. I've just had the most interesting lunch with Marcus's wife. The subtle emphasis on interesting made his stomach churn. She shared some enlightening information about your recent business trips to Europe. The pause that followed felt like an eternity. And about Isabella. Meanwhile, across town in a dimly lit office, Isabella Martinez sat across from a figure hidden in shadow. Their conversation revealing layers of deception even Jonathan couldn't have imagined. Everything is proceeding according to plan, Isabella reported, her confident facade masking inner turmoil. Be desperate enough to transfer the assets by tomorrow. The figure leaned forward, revealing a face that would have shocked Jonathan to his core. Catherine's father, Richard Montgomery, the man who had given Jonathan his first break in finance 20 years ago. Excellent. Richard's voice carried the weight of decades of carefully orchestrated revenge. My daughter deserves better than a man who built his fortune on betrayal. When this is over, Maxwell investments will be nothing but a cautionary tale. What neither Isabella nor Richard knew was that Catherine had her own agenda, one that would blindside them all. The web of betrayal grew more complex as Jonathan arrived at the Pierre Hotel, the luxurious suites where he had shared countless passionate encounters with, through productive work rather than destructive revenge. Thomas himself had undergone the most visible transformation after extensive counseling and reconciliation. With his sister Catherine, he had become an advocate for corporate whistleblowers, using his own experience to help others come forward with evidence of corruption. Richard Montgomery watched these developments from federal prison, where he would spend the next decade. His weekly letters to Eleanor showed signs of genuine remorse and self-reflection, though she remained cautiously optimistic about his eventual rehabilitation. As the family gathered for dinner that evening, Eleanor observed the subtle changes in their interactions, the way Jonathan now instinctively sought Catherine's input before making decisions, how Rebecca's sharp wit had softened into wisdom, Thomas's growing ability to speak about the past without bitterness. During the meal, Eleanor raised her glass for a toast to the price of truth and the value of redemption. The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning for each person present. Later that night, as the ocean waves crashed against the shore, Jonathan found himself walking along the beach with Catherine. Do you ever regret, he asked, that your mother exposed everything? Catherine was quiet for a moment before responding. I regret that it was necessary, but I'm grateful for the opportunity to build something real from the ashes of what was false in her study. Eleanor put the finishing touches on her memoirs, The Architecture of Truth, a Family's Journey from Betrayal to Redemption. The manuscript would later become a bestseller and required reading and business ethics courses nationwide. Rebecca, working late in the technology center, received an encrypted message, not for corporate espionage this time, but from a major tech company interested in implementing her security protocols. Her path to legitimacy had opened doors she never expected. Thomas, in his new office overlooking the Atlantic, hung a framed photo of the original Montgomery family before the betrayals began. Beside it, he placed a recent picture of their reconstructed family, scarred but stronger, wiser but more compassionate. The security systems that now protected their compound were state-of-the-art, designed by Rebecca herself, but the real security came from something more fundamental, the shared understanding that truth, however painful, was preferable to the gilded cage of deception they had built around themselves. As midnight approached, Eleanor made one final entry in her personal diary. Power corrupts, they say, but the power of truth can also heal. Our family's story isn't about the perfect victory of good over evil. It's about the messy, complicated process of choosing to be better today than we were yesterday. Perhaps that's the only kind of redemption that truly matters. The lights of the estate dimmed one by one, leaving only the moonlight, reflecting off the ocean. The night air carried the promise of tomorrow, not a perfect